People make decisions based on a couple of things. One is when the pain of the status quo exceeds the pain of change.
Hello and welcome to episode 219 of the Smart Agents Podcast. As always, my name is Michael Walter and I'll be your host. On today's episode, we are joined by brand and behavioral strategist Roger Hurni. Emphasizing the importance of understanding consumer behavior, Roger discusses how effective marketing campaigns should focus on the audience's self-interest and motivations. Over the course of our conversation, Roger shares strategies and advice for identifying your ideal customers and creating targeted campaigns that resonate with them. Additionally, we dive into how agents can better set themselves up for success by focusing on the customer experience rather than the transaction itself. But before we get on to today's featured interview, if you or someone else on your team has an incredible story of real estate success or tips to share with our community, send us a message to feedback@smartagents.com. We're always on the lookout for new guests to inspire our listeners. And lastly, if you enjoyed this conversation and want to hear more, be sure to subscribe to the Smart Agents Podcast. We stream on all major podcasting platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and YouTube. All right, let's get on with our conversation with Roger Hurni. If you're interested in learning more about behavioral marketing, check out his book, Outthink, Outperform. I have a link in the episode description. Well, really the way I like to start everything out is if you could just introduce yourself to us a little bit, kind of give us a brief background on your sales and marketing experience.
Well, I am Roger Hurni, and I appreciate you having me on the show. My background is 30 years in the advertising and marketing field, where I worked as an art director and a copywriter. But everything I've done has been through the lens of behavioral science and changing customer behavior, and oftentimes changing the behavior of people inside of organizations, inside their sales structure or their operations structure. And I use the scientific models from Dr. B.J. Fogg at Stanford University, and I apply them to different situations to help people shift their audience's behavior, their customers' behavior, and sometimes even their own behavior.
Yeah. So, in your own career, when did you start using those models that you were just talking about?
Yeah, it's funny. I describe this in my book, Outthink, Outperform. I've been doing this work since the late 80s when I was a teenager getting into advertising. And people would ask me, like, why is this campaign successful, or why is this initiative so successful? And I honestly didn't have an answer for them. I felt like I was pulling stuff out of the ether and just making things happen. And around 2016, I had met Dr. Fogg. I'd gone through one of his boot camps. We started talking about his behavioral models. And within 20 minutes, this light went off. It was this epiphany moment. I'm like, oh my goodness, like that's exactly what I do. I didn't have the vocabulary and the tools to be able to explain to people why marketing worked, why persuasion worked, why I was able to shift customer behaviors. So it's been 8-9 years now that I've had that language, and it's been a game changer for helping people understand what can be effective and what can't be effective a lot of times before they even try an initiative, so they don't waste time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, before we really kind of dive into some of these behavioral marketing strategies and tips for our agents, I have to ask, you mentioned, doing artwork and being part of, the marketing campaigns. And, so many times people will buy things because of an emotional connection that they make with that piece of art, or, maybe it's that commercial they see on TV. I know we're at the time of recording this, we're coming up on the Thanksgiving season. And what are you going to see with the grocery store ads? It's that family time that they really kind of start, using in their ads. What is it about creating emotional, triggers and responses that, make certain marketing campaigns work so well?
Well, I'm going to take one step back, if you'll allow me. One of the mistakes I see many companies make, and honestly, this is very dominant in the real estate business, is that people will provide information believing it will change behavior. And information never changes behavior. It's a proven scientific fact. If it did, no one would be smoking. Like there's the essential,
Right.
the quintessential case study on that. More to your point about the question of that emotional connection, people make decisions based on a couple of things. One is when the pain of the status quo exceeds the pain of change. So I'm going to change agents. I'm going to decide to sell my house. I'm going to decide to buy a house, whatever that means. There's some sort of shift. But that decision is only made when it is representative of our self-interest. We don't make decisions on whether something is right or something is wrong. We make decisions based on our self-interest. If our self-interest is not to buy a house, but to create a home, well, that's different. And that has an emotional component to it. Because there is a rationality to that decision. Sure, there's numbers and you've got to make sure you get the best deal. But this is someplace you're going to live. And not including that emotional component into the process is a mistake that can be easily avoided. Because, I mean, gosh, I see all the time real estate, it's like their picture and the trusting face, that's great. But it's like best expert in, choose your neighborhood name right here and a phone number. And that's information. And they may be the best expert, but that's not necessarily relevant to my self-interest. I would rather see something, I'm totally making this up on the fly. I would rather have them see something like, I've helped 800 families in the last 3 years create a home in this neighborhood. Joe Schmo real estate agent, phone number. Something that appeals to the self-interest of their clients is more critical than providing information. And that's why, to your question, that emotional component of campaigns is so successful because it's tapping into existing motivations and tapping into that self-interest of that decision. And then the most important part is making it easy as possible for them to make a decision to go with you or go buy your product or what have you.
Yeah. And you've mentioned your book a couple of times. I want to step back. When did you write your book, and what was it that made you want to get into, sharing your own experiences and advice?
Yeah. Well, the book just came out in July of 2024. So it's this year. It's only been out for a few months. Why I wrote the book, I have a lot of friends with small to medium-sized businesses, and the companies I own, I've worked on Nike and UPS Europe and Gillette Europe and WD-40. I mean, if you're a real estate agent or you're a small to medium-sized business, generally you don't have access to this level of expertise. It's just a budget issue, right? More than anything else. So I had a lot of friends prompt me and said, hey, you've helped me a lot in me kicking off and starting a new business, or helping me get from my business of, $1 million in revenue to $5 million in revenue by just giving me advice on what I should do and what I shouldn't do. It would be great to see a book. And I had enough people over a 3 or 4 year period say that, to where I'm like, you know what, I could easily put together a behavioral framework and a way to teach people to solve problems differently, to think differently about a situation so they could take that on themselves. And so the book is a guide, really, that can allow anybody to learn from those stories, follow those behavioral models, follow the behavioral framework, and help shift their customers' behavior. And that really became the catalyst for it. More than anything else was enough of those friends who I helped over the years for free saying, we would love to see this as a sort of a guidebook.
Right. Absolutely. Well, kind of diving into, some of the lessons in your book, but then also just your overall philosophy on behavioral marketing. I noticed, one of the very first chapter titles, I think it's chapter 2, talks about you can't change, other people's behaviors unless you change your own. So how important is it to really look at, you and your business model, or really what you're projecting out there before you can start changing some of your, your clients and your potential leads?
Well, that's honestly the first step. If you're not willing to try something different and experiment and look at solving problems from a different perspective, employ some lateral thinking, if you will, then everything else doesn't matter. Because if you feel like, okay, here are the 3 things that I do to get clients, here are the 3 things I do to close real estate deals, that may be working for you. And quite frankly, there's probably a lot of people out there that have a successful formula. What they don't know is how much money they're leaving on the table, how many opportunities that they're not getting to grow beyond that. And so if you're not willing to start to look at things differently and change your own behavior and in your approach, then yeah, the book's honestly not for you. Again, those can be successful business models. But more times than not, I have seen plenty of companies be thinking that they were satisfied, but recognizing that there were all these other opportunities, and they changed behavior. As a matter of fact, I had a conversation with a CEO of a Fortune 500 company one time, and they were talking about market share. And I said, I don't care what kind of market share you have. I don't care how successful you think you are. I defy you to find me a company with 60, 70, 80, 90% market share and have that CEO tell me, yeah, that's enough.
Yeah.
It's never enough. When you own a company, unless you have 110% market share, it's probably never enough. And there's always something you can do to improve that.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes, for our real estate agents that are, listening to this and wanting to figure out, okay, so how do I start creating those campaigns that hit on different, behavioral triggers? I guess the first part is you probably have to really figure out who your audience is and who your audience base is.
Yeah. The first question most people have to face, or the first realization I should say that people have to face, or these real estate agents have to face, is not everybody's going to be a client. Just because they're in the market for a house doesn't mean you're the right agent or they're the right client for you. And there could be a whole host of reasons for that. They could be in the early buying stages and, they're just really not ready because they're still in the investigation stages, or, they, because of what's been happening with commissions and everything that's happening there, maybe they're like, I only want to pay 2%, in which case you're like, I'm not going to go down this road, right? There could be a whole host of reasons of why someone's not going to be a client. So if you can wrap your head around, all right, first off is, I don't need everybody to be a client. I need the right people to be a client. Then the next question is, of the right people, who are the most highly motivated to hire someone like me to do what I do? And then laser focus on them by giving them all the ability, not to just to choose you, but to get through the process in an understandable way. And it's sort of a different way of thinking. And often what I'll tell SMBs, or honestly a lot of people, is that, look, we all have to win business. We all have to win clients. And whenever someone is in a situation where they're trying to do that, usually the first question that they say, either externally or just in their head, is, how do I win this client over? How do I win this piece of business, right? It's the wrong question to ask, because it taps into something in behavioral economics called confirmation bias. If you start with that question, you're going to put forth everything that you're great at, but you're going to miss blind spots. You're going to miss why you might not get that client, why you might not get that piece of business. The better question to ask is, how do I lose this client? How do I lose this piece of business? By doing that simple thing, it will help you focus on your weak spots, and you'll concentrate on overcoming those, because your strengths, they're probably pretty great, but your weak spots, that's what people don't think about. And then they lose a client, they lose a piece of business, and they're like, yeah, I don't understand why we didn't get that, because you often don't get the real answer. So changing the question up front to avoid confirmation bias is one of the most critical things you can do. I mean, if you do nothing else, if you just ask yourself that question in those situations, you will be steps ahead of everybody else, because you will put together the kind of work, the kind of messaging, have the kind of conversations to help overcome those negative issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think, I think there can be a lot gained from, going into things right out of the gate. Like, okay, there's this particular seller, maybe they're going through some kind of a hardship. What are the different things that I could do to turn them off or to not want to work with me?
Right.
What, so, once you've kind of established who, uh, the people that you want to work with in your market and the people that you want to attract, how do you start taking that idea of your customer base and building a marketing campaign that's going to resonate with them?
So once we've established that, the best thing to do is you start to put pen to paper and list everything that could be an objection, anything that could decrease someone's ability to choose you, choose your product. The campaign, and again, this is where a lot of people make a mistake. They think a campaign is one idea everywhere. And when there were 3 television stations and a handful of cables, whatever, and a newspaper, like that could work and you can spread that net. But now a campaign isn't a campaign. It's lots of little campaigns that overcome any of those objections, any of those inabilities, and they change over time as people interface with them. So if you've got 5 or 6 maybe key issues, that campaign should focus on, any campaign should focus on each of those 5 or 6 issues. Now, one of them might be best handled in a channel like, social media. And even then, looking at consumer psychology, we don't handle all social media channels the same way. Facebook, depending on your audience, age demographic, literally, but if Facebook is generally about community and X is generally about breaking news and Instagram is generally about lifestyle and TikTok is generally about entertainment and self-interest. So you can take something and have it work in one aspect of social media, but not all aspects of social media. Then there could be another inability that you need to address. And it's actually best handled with public relations or one-to-one conversations with customers to overcome a fear. So get those things down on paper, understand where's the best way to communicate each of those inabilities based on that audience makeup. And again, you're thinking of it as different smaller campaigns. Even if the campaign is you having a conversation as a salesperson, that's still a campaign. And you need to attack each of the communication channels appropriately. Don't spread out a wide net. Don't think that you have to be on every channel in social media. 1 might be enough. 3 might be enough. Just depends on your business, depends on your resources. That includes time. Some people have a team. Some people are doing it by themselves. It's better to start small and build over time or focus on a specific channel rather than try to be everywhere and appeal to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. When you are, launching a new campaign and have, worked with different clients on, launching their own, what's that kind of, and I understand it's different for everybody and in every situation, but I think a lot of times, especially agents or smaller businesses, they might launch a campaign and want like immediate results. And in real estate, you gotta build that trust with people first. So one Facebook ad isn't necessarily going to drive you a whole bunch of sales in the next week. So how do setting up those expectations for how a campaign is working?
Yeah, what's sad is that it has happened. Like people have done one social media post and then their business exploded, or they've done one Facebook ad and they just nailed everything because of timing. That's dumb luck, and it can happen. But it happens like 1 out of every, and I'm going to make up this number, 10 million times. So that's what I would believe not reliable. You have to be patient, particularly when you're building a following. And like you're a podcaster, there's lots of podcasters who are fairly famous, and they talk about, oh yeah, I did this for years. I built up enough of a library, enough of a content before I finally got traction. And yeah, there might have been a tipping point of one person that you interviewed, but to get to that one person took all these other people that helped that one person who was the tipping point decide to be interviewed by you, right? So people have to be patient, and there is going to be some experimentation. Looking at behavioral analysis of who's doing what and why they're doing it can tell you what you should do next. The problem with Google Analytics is people are like, wow, this happened and this worked really well and that worked really well, or this didn't work so well. That's great, but that's Google telling you what you should do next, not what has been done. If you look at it only as what has been done, you'll never understand what you should do next. You need to kind of figure out why that worked. What behaviors did you actually change? Was it something specific in the messaging or the background or the imagery or who you had deliver the message? Those little things will give you a better roadmap. And then over time, change happens incrementally, and little things can make big differences down the road.
When you just talking about, what was it that made somebody do something? So like, it's maybe like use an email, for example. I know even for us, we will try different email headlines. We'll split test the headlines, or we'll split test some copy, or maybe even where a link, the hyperlink is necessarily located. I do think it's sometimes for somebody that doesn't have a whole lot of experience with that, it can get really overwhelming when there are a whole lot of different things that you can move, even just in a simple email. So how do you start determining what was it that worked?
So I don't start with the mechanics, because I actually think there's a lot of value in A/B variant testing, different headlines, where the call to action button should be, whether that button should be red or blue or green or what have you. There's merit in all of that. But that's not the starting point. The starting point is deciphering messaging that changes behavior. Again, it has to do with overcoming each of those hurdles. If someone lacks the ability to perform a behavior, like perhaps what you have to do is you have to do something called behavior sequencing and break that larger behavior down into lots of smaller behaviors, right? So since you're in the real estate game, look, it would be great if I could run one ad and get 3 clients the next day. It would be wonderful to be able to do that. And maybe that can happen every once in a while, and you just get lucky because 3 clients just happen to be needing houses the very, very next day. When things are tough, like interest rates have been high, like that's the time to establish yourself as an expert who delivers something to that client that is meaningful to that client, not meaningful to you, and not chest pounding about how great of an expert you are. And so seeding the ground with that level of meaningfulness to those clients, that's what initially gets things started. And you'll hear it back from people. You'll hear them say like, I went with you because I saw that you helped 300 people in the last 10 years of your career find these great homes in this neighborhood. The foregone conclusion is clearly you're the expert, but that's not why they're hiring you. They're hiring you because it's been gone on faith that you've helped 300 people find a home of their dreams, right? That's a very different conversation. Once you get that understanding of that kind of messaging, now as you're putting it out there, great. Contact me is up here. Contact me is below here. Contact me is in red. Contact me is in blue. For a video tour of a home, or, hey, let me answer, because sales aren't about sales. Sales are about being helpful. Hey, at no cost, let me know the 3 questions that are top of mind, and I will get you a response within 24 hours. That would be huge, because most people don't do that. I know when home builders go into that process, it's confusing as hell. Home sellers, it's confusing. And so for someone to be willing to help more than sell is going to be it'll be a big differentiator for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, with anything you're doing as a real estate agent, you really have to, you can't go into it with like a transactional mindset.
No.
Everything has to be about building those relationships and making sure that you're building long-term relationships. Because at real estate, if you want to scale up, it's all about having those, those referral clients and those past clients that are coming back to you.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. It's an experiential process. It's not a transactional process. And the more you treat it like a transaction, the less you're going to build those relationships over time. I know that, I have a friend who's in this game, and I've bought 3 houses from him, and I probably recommend, more importantly, forget me buying 3 houses from him over the last 15 years, 20 years, because I've refurbished them. I have probably recommended him 24 times. Now, I don't know how many of those he closed, but the recommendations are far more important than the fact that I bought. I could have bought him from him once. That's okay. But if I recommended him 24 times, and if every person who buys from him once recommends that person 6, 10, 12, 20 times, That's an amazing book of business, right? If you're going to just strictly be transactional, there are apps for that. And they're generally for people who know exactly what they're doing, or they're incredibly cheap, and they're probably not going to be your client. So don't try to go after them. Don't try and change their behavior. They think they have everything figured out. Great, let them. There are plenty of other opportunities out there to change your business in profound ways by ignoring an audience that you're not going to get much yield out of, nor recommendations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for agents, that's a great opportunity to have blogs, that you're just, you're sharing things out there, have guides that maybe you do have it as some type of a lead magnet and it gets people onto an emailing list. But at the end of the day, there's not a huge call to action, right out of the gate on that first one to call me. Here's how I can help you. This is just simply, here are some of the top 10 things to know about, purchasing a new build in this area.
I'm sure every real estate agent has probably dozens of questions that have been asked over and over and over again by clients or potential clients. Mm-hmm. Take every single question, turn it into a piece of content. Yeah. Write a blog about it, do a social media post about it, be a resource for all those kinds of questions with like a searchable database. That's being helpful, because I might not choose you, but I will trust you because you're providing me help before I'm ready to make a decision.
Yeah, absolutely. We've touched on it also, and you said it, that you've have referred your friend, dozens of potential clients. First of all, was this somebody that you knew prior to them being a real estate agent, or had you met them, as an agent?
So I didn't meet them as an agent. So this was a person who they were doing just under $1 million in revenue a year. And he had asked me, it was a small business, he asked me like, hey, what should I be doing? I'm like, well, let me look at what you're doing. And over the period of about 7 or 8 years, this is how you should really tackle your website. Here's why. Here's the kind of messaging. This is how you can bring a value proposition. One of the things I opened up to him was, there's an entirely different, like, you think your audience is this, but there's an opportunity to expand that audience set into an entire different realm that has nothing to do with guys who ride motorcycles, into people who are having weddings. Like, he couldn't see that connection, but because he thought it was about this one product, and it wasn't really about that. I just told him, I said, you know what, Adam, you're in the wrong business. You're not in the business of selling X. You're in the business of creating memories, of having a keepsake and something that's memorable. I go, when you think about your product in that fashion, there are 2 or 3 different audiences you could sell to that aren't these guys. And once he understood that his product wasn't the product, that it was something that was meaningful, that tapped into a self-interest, then he opened up a couple of different categories, and his business like 5-fold over the next 5 or 6 years. And then he sold it. And after he sold it, he's like, I don't really need to work, but I love real estate and I like refurbishing homes. Kind of like, I like doing that too. Like, my wife and I have done 7 homes in the last 25, 30 years. And he's really great at it. And so when we were starting to look for our next house to renovate, I called him up and he's like, yeah, I'll be happy to take care of you. And it's just sort of worked out from there. But it was because I helped him over the years. And then he honestly reciprocated by helping me, gave me a little bit better deal on like 1% off a commission. Like, real estate agents will do that as your friend. The co-broke is still 3% to the other side. They don't care, So he's willing to take a little less money, and he's also willing to help me out by lending me a reciprocating saw for a renovation if I didn't own one yet, right? But again, that has to do about being just a good person in the community and just trying to help people out where you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for agents, to really, once the sale once the transaction has been closed, I think sometimes that's like really where some of the real work starts in keeping up those relationships and making sure that, when a real estate need comes for either themselves or a friend or a family member, you're the person that's top of mind.
Yeah.
Because you lended them that saw 2 weeks ago.
You reminded me of something that I noticed between, because I've had other real estate agents I bought homes from before, represented me before. There's always that you bought the home, congratulations, here's flowers, here's a basket of cookies, here's a sign with the, location of your home in latitude and longitude. I've gotten that one once. And those are all nice. They're charming. They're really wonderful. But like by my friend, Adam, it was, hey, what's the first project you're thinking of be working on? I know a concrete guy. I know a window person for repair. Here's my great AC person. A year later, or even staying in constant contact with that person, I would call him up and I'd say, hey, this happened. Do you know anybody that does X, right? Always willing to lend a hand, not to make money, but to help me in that situation. And I think that's where real estate agents can really learn a lesson that the post-sale, quote unquote, relationship goes beyond a thank you. I mean, do the thank you. Don't get me wrong. It's wonderful. But you have to think deeper than that. You have to act deeper than that. Having the kind of relationships with people who just, a fix-it person or, a dog groomer for people who moved in the neighborhood and don't know anybody, like all those little things that turn a house into a home and make you feel part of the community. For that real estate agent to have all of those relationships ready at a moment's notice and be prepared to share that wealth, that makes a difference between someone who feels like they've got my back and someone who's just trying to close a deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before I let you go, I do want to ask, and you touched on it towards the beginning of our conversation, is, it's no longer do we have just, like the three channels that you can, a campaign can get run on, or, one or two different avenues. I mean, there are, with all the different social media channels and and how easy it is for somebody to search you and find you online. How have you seen marketing and, the behavior behind what triggers a sale change over that time that, so much information is out there now?
I think it's gotten more confusing. Before, when you could cast a really big net, there's been bad advertising, bad marketing for decades. It's actually, I think, worse today because there's so much of it that's bad, that it's just honestly more noticeable. But before, you could make a brand statement about yourself that felt meaningful to your audience and cast a big net, and it would change behavior because it tapped into an existing motivation. That's much harder today because audiences are so fragmented. So you do kind of have to be everywhere, but you have to be everywhere uniquely. Again, you shouldn't have to be everywhere. You have to choose the right places to be there, but be unique in each of those places where you can have something. It's social proof. And I don't mean social proof as in social media. Recommendations from friends, that's probably the best kind of marketing you're going to get these days, and that is social proof. It's people recommending you, people sharing your content. That's social proof that what you do, you are the expert. And you're the expert not because people want to hire you because you're the expert. You're the expert because you care. You bring something above and beyond what everybody else does, right? You have that list of all those types of people that can help you turn your house into a home or make your life a little easier because you've got the dog groomer or a landscaper. It's like, oh my goodness, my irrigation system broke. I just need someone to change a sprinkler head, right? Not everybody knows how to do that, nor do they have the ability or desire to learn it, right? That's really what's shifted. It's gone from this big net into these individual conversations that you have that you build over time. The more you understand that, the more you can collect those kinds of stories and allow those stories to take on a life of their own and be shared, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, it seems like that is really gone in line with the way real estate as a whole has gone. It's not so much, you're not so much thinking of the brokerage anymore. You're really connecting with the individual agent. I can't tell you, I've used 3 or 4 different agents in the last several years, and I couldn't tell you what brokerage they work for. I have no idea.
Yeah, it doesn't matter because the relationship's not with the brokerage. I don't care. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus and start naming names, right? But you see the signs all the time, and it's like, who cares? It's the brokerages feel like a commodity to me, much like insurance companies do, right? Just what's the cheapest price for this particular car, right? Who's going to give me the best deal? Who's going to take care of me? It comes down to, oh, it's going to be Michael, or it's going to be Adam, it's going to be Jill, it's going to be whoever. That's where it happens. And regardless of whatever is going to happen with commissions and how that works, there's a value that both sides bring to the table. The more they can demonstrate that value, the less the commission thing is an issue. And it will be an issue for some people, no doubt. Certain agents are just going to lose business because there's going to be people out there who are just really cheap or don't understand the value. They're not your audience. Like, you can try to work hard to convince them of the value, but I don't know. I think there's a lot of other opportunities out there than trying to work that hard for that one extra sale when there's probably 3 others who do understand the value and could use your help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Put your effort in the right place.
Yeah, definitely. Well, with that, where can people find your book and learn more about everything you're teaching?
Oh, well, my book's available everywhere, including my website, but it's also on Amazon. And honestly, that's probably the easiest thing for people to do is buy it on Amazon. Although my one pet peeve with Amazon is they don't do dust jackets. So if you want a hardcover with a dust jacket, which I think is what a book is, you can buy that on my website. And that's just rogerhurni.com, ROGERHURNI.com.
Awesome.
Honestly, Google my name.
Yeah.
You'll get me. I'll get Forbes articles. You'll get whatever. It's one of the things about being a writer is you once you're published, stuff is just out there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we will most definitely put links to your website and your book in the episode description. And I really do appreciate you taking the time to spend with us today.
Well, I've been truly enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate the questions, and hopefully your audience finds a lot of value in it.
I really want to thank Roger for joining us today and agree that by focusing on your lead's self-interest and motivations, you can craft more effective marketing campaigns. Remember to check out the episode description if you would like to get a copy of Roger's book, Outthink, Outperform. So once again, if you think you or someone else on your team has an incredible story or real estate tips to share with our community, send us a message to feedback@smartagents.com. Well, that wraps things up for this episode, but remember, follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts and make sure to subscribe to the Smart Agents YouTube channel. Again, I'm Michael Walter, and we'll see you on the next episode.